Hello, my fellow theatre people. Here with you for the very last video in Shaketube 2019, where we've been doing the plays of Shakespeare all throughout the month of September. This has been hosted by the wonderful fellows Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse, Lukas at Totally Pretentious, and Steve Donoghue. And yes, thank you again all for hosting this event and giving me an excuse to read Shakespeare, because I really enjoy it, and I really enjoy the intense experience of reading as much Shakespeare as I possibly can in the month of September. So let us get on with the triumphant climactic end of Shaketube, which is the Two Gentlemen of Verona, which, that said, I actually did find it, well, there was no tears welling up at the end of reading or also watching the end of this play as there was for The Winter's Tale. So here, let me start off with a really quick plot, because there's not much plot. Two dudes of Verona, they part, they're intense buds, bros. One goes off to Milan, I think we'll go with Milan, to go see his true love. The other one, he's got other stuff to do, but his father kicks him out, and he ends up going there as well, where he parts from his love. This is Proteus. He parts from Julia. They exchange rings. He goes off to Milan to, and there he finds that Valentine is in love with Sylvia. And he quickly forgets about Julia and starts pursuing Sylvia, sabotages Valentine. Valentine gets banished into the woods. Sylvia ends up kind of going after him. Proteus goes after her. He's been pestering her the whole time. She's been saying, "Go away. You're a scumbag for betraying your friend. You're a scumbag for trying to get under my dress." So, no way. And he finally catches up to her in the woods. This is while he is indeed accompanied by his love, Julia, who's decided, I really want to, help him, be with him. She disguises herself as a page. So she finds herself actually helping Proteus. And she actually really respects Sylvia for telling her dirtbag boyfriend to buzz off. But, she's following behind. And so you have Valentine and you have Julia witness Proteus try and rape Sylvia. It's like she says no, and he says, "Well, I'm going to do it by force." Surprises him. Proteus immediately goes, "Oh, I was wrong. I repent completely." As if you've watched the Measure for Measure video, that might have an echo, and we'll get back to that later. He immediately repents. Valentine goes, "Oh, you repented. Wow, you're such a great guy. Well, you can have Sylvia then." And he's like, and Sylvia doesn't say anything at this. This is one of those Shakespearean silences. But Proteus is like, "Oh no, that's okay. That's okay. I'll stick with Julia." So Valentine's like, "Oh, great. Well, we can get married now, and we're gonna have the bonds of friendship. We're best buds again. We're bros." And they walk off the stage. The women say nothing. They have nothing to say. And so it's like at the end of the play where that is the big what the fuck moment in this play. So that's I guess you can kind of tell what my reaction to this play was. It's just like, what the fuck of these bros? They're like super close. Oh, bros. And at the end, it's a happy ending because the bros get back together again, and they're never going to part now. And you can sort of see that there's this whole thing of, and now they're going to be married. They're going from being kind of unmarried, kind of wild dudes, off seeking stuff. This is going to actually kind of settle them down. This is going to bond them together. So yes, that's my kind of initial reaction to this play. It's like, just like kind of actually Valentine is constant in his love. It is very much kind of the courtly love of the thing. There's also kind of one of those kind of funny, you always have to have like kind of the B plots or C plots in Shakespeare where Launce, who is he has his dog Crab, and there's much made of the friendship between Launce and Crab. It's like he's actually kind of, they're loyal. When Crab pisses on a woman's dress and the thing, and they're gonna whip the dog, he says like, "Oh no." Launce is like, "Oh no, it was me, I did it," and so they whip me out of the thing instead because, you know, a boy and his dog. I responded to that, at least in this play, of like, oh, the thing. Though you can also see this as, we'll get into this with Emma Smith, of exactly what kind of, there's a platonic relationship being made fun of with Launce and Crab, and there's also kind of the things of courtly manners and courting that is being made fun of with Launce and Crab. Let me go through kind of some of the little critical things on this. We'll start off very quickly, with the book one of the books I've been reading this with Shaketube, which is Women of Will, which I've just adopted the thing of, I kind of go to what she says about specific plays, and that's sort of what I pay attention to. She doesn't actually have too much to say about Two Gentlemen of Verona. There's basically a kind of a paragraph there of, it's one of his early plays. She immediately assumes, and we'll get to that later with Emma Smith, my other author of this thing, immediately assumes. Strangely enough, she's like, she quite rightly notes, you know, okay, this is very much a play that's about bro-ish, the male relationship, not the female relationships. Though she doesn't actually mention that Proteus actually tried to rape Sylvia at the end of the play, which you would think in a book, when we're talking about kind of following the feminine in Shakespeare's plays, the subtitle of Women of Will, and just sort of that male relationship thing, that something like where there's an attempted rape at the end of the play, you think that would actually come up, but it doesn't. It's, I don't know why or not. I mean, it's quite a quick glancing through. Maybe if she started mentioning that, she'd have to probably put a couple more paragraphs in there, and she didn't want to really devote that much to this play. So that's sort of what she has to say. It's that kind of bro-ish thing. She of course goes, I love her. It's her maybes. Maybe such a friendship existed between Shakespeare and the actor Richard Burbridge, or Shakespeare and Richard Field, the publisher. So yeah, she always has to slip in, but maybe this, but maybe that. It's like, yeah, maybe. Okay, maybe Tina Packer. So that's Tina Packer's contribution to this conversation, or at least what I'm going to take from it. And the other one was Emma Smith, and she doesn't have a chapter, not surprisingly, perhaps, of about This is Shakespeare in her book, but in her podcast, which are sort of workings up of this book. She does indeed have a podcast on Two Gentlemen of Verona. She uses Crab the dog as sort of a framing device for her talk on Shakespeare. Smith starts off by talking about how there's a lot of assumptions that this is an early play, mostly because people's reasoning on this is that it is, as always with Shakespeare, our documentation is very spotty. Tina Packer. So we have to be careful. Then we just assume that it was an early play because it's about juvenile characters, that it is juvenilia. Smith focuses on the intense male relationship between Valentine and Proteus, how they part. They have a very kind of intense parting at the beginning of this, and that how this by modern eyes might be seen as like could be a gay relationship of some sort. But she kind of cautions against that this is a relationship. This is pre us having these divisions of gay and straight, where there could be intense male relationships, and indeed this is in a society where intense male relationships were valued over romantic relationships. Like those are the important relationships of the society, and I mean, this play has got to be a good exhibit number one for that, in its kind of baldness of, at the beginning of this play, these two guys part, and the happy ending at the end of this play isn't particularly them getting getting joined with the two women, but them healing their division, their split, and them walking off happily into the sunset. Indeed, in the play that I'll put a link down below to the play I watched. They staged at the end, that was the two guys walked off happily, arm in arm, and the women were like, "Oh, okay," and then they walked happily off, arm in arm. Happily-ish, I guess, arm in arm, or somewhat scornful of the two bro doughhead. Yeah, so, and I really think about, there's so many echoes in this play of the think about Winter's Tale, where there's that strange switch with Leontes and Polixenes, where Leontes suddenly gets massively jealous about Hermione being with Polixenes. And there's some ways that you wonder if it's like, as a modern audience, we look at that and think it's like, oh, he's jealous that she's going with him. But in some ways it could be more, he's jealous of Polixenes being the one that is putting a romantic relationship in front of their primary relationship, their intense friendship at the beginning of the play. Now that's the one thing you can say about the differences between something like the Winter's Tale and Two Men of Verona, is that at the end there does actually seem to be a kind of a genuine relationship of equals of that relationship between Hermione and Leontes is actually the relationship that is going to be primary. We don't suddenly have Leontes go, "Oh, we're all solved," and walking arm in arm off with Polixenes. That said, it's interesting. I'm listening to a lot of people's videos, and I also really love Paulina in Winter's Tale, but it's interesting how at the end of the play, there's a woman who's a widow. She doesn't have a wife, so he doesn't have a husband. So Leontes is like, "Oh, well, you can marry Camillo here," and I don't think Paulina gets to have consent in that. I don't think there's not a thing of consent. Like, that's another one of those Shakespearean silences. So even at this, what might be considered, maybe, perhaps, a late play, even though there's a bit of a growth, there's also, here's a single woman. Okay, we'll put her in a marriage with this guy, and we're not going to particularly ask her about it. There's this idea of marriage isn't a union between a man and a woman. A marriage is a union between men. That is saying is the way men become related kinfolk is that they marry the woman, but the woman is simply used as a means, a chattel to hook your wagon to other men. And you can see in a play like this, that at the end, he's talking about how we're going to join our marriages together. That's not about the women. That's about getting the two guys get to be bros together. We get to hang out together. We get to be friends. And again, in that intense kind of relationship. Other echoes. I think this is what I'm finding probably most valuable about Two Gentlemen of Verona is just like echoes of, well, how did Angelo react when he was unmasked as being this corrupt guy who was trying to sexually abuse Isabella? He's like, "Oh, I plead for forgiveness. I plead for forgiveness. The scales have fallen away from my eyes." And in the end, he's punished by being married off to a woman. Again, this seems to be, there's definitely a part of this play, and a lot of Shakespearean stuff is, we need to take the men and put them in relations with other women, with other men, to kind of harness very dangerous male energies. This is probably when we can go back to like Emma Smith talking about the dog Crab, where there's Smith talks about how this is very much a Shakespeare, who is a humanist, is perhaps with the dog is actually making a point of, we're not exceptional, we are actually animal. And having this dog coming into a court situation and peeing on a woman's dress, it's like he's marking his territory. Is that what all the courtly love is dudes walking around and they're marking their territory. But saying that, you can't have the human without the animal. That is intrinsically a part of ourselves, and we may put a lot of layers and a lot of beautiful, maybe cliched language on top of all this stuff, but it's simply a pretty vessel for what are very animal, dangerous emotions, dangerous drives that if we're going to live together, we need to harness. Whether that is, and that's oftentimes, especially in marriages. That is marriages in the Shakespearean comedy. So thank you, Jason, Lukas, and Steve. That said, more videos later, but next year, more Shaketube.